Happy New Year! Welcome to Padma Samye Ling, the Venerable Khenpo Rinpoches Monastery and Retreat Center in New York. And we're doing the 8th Morning Dawn webcast. And today we'll be discussing the chapter, The Power of Compassion, from the Venerable Khenpo Rinpoche's book, The Buddhist Path. So first we'll just do our usual opening prayers and then we'll go into the discussion. Well, thanks. Samantabhadra, Vajrasattva, Pramanabhadra, Sri Singha, Padmakara, the 25 king and subjects, So, Sur, Nun, Nyang, the 100 Kirtans and others, the lamas of the Kama and terminal lineages, to you I pray. The supreme tradition of the glorious Buddha Padmasambhava, which is the essential, extraordinary view and doctrine of the early translation school, you keep alive and spread by the light of wisdom. Lord of Dharma, great Khenpo, I pray at your lotus feet. In the palace of the old man Dharmadhatu, the essence of all the Buddhas of the 3 times, the one who shows clearly the Dharmakaya of my own mind, we pray to the Honorable Root Guru, glorious root teacher, precious one, dwelling on the lotus seat on the crown of my head, hold me with your great kindness, and bestow the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind. Om Maravasanadi, Om Maravasanadi, Om Maravasanadi. So this chapter 8 of the Buddhist Path is mainly going over the story of the great master Sangha. And so maybe we thought Amanda would just kind of overview this story. So then after that we'll go into these main topic points of discussion for this group.
Yeah, so this is the chapter on the power of compassion. And basically the Rinpoches start out by talking about how compassion is the most powerful tool for overcoming our karmic obscurations. And also for overcoming obstacles to enlightenment. So compassion being so important. And then they go into this story about a sangha who was a famous Indian scholar about 500 years after the Buddha's time. And he had kind of, he was really very learned and he still had many questions and sort of doubts that he wasn't getting resolved. So he decided to go on a retreat, do practice on Maitreya, Buddha Maitreya, future Buddha. So he went into retreat and he was there for about 3 years and doing, this like a lot of retreat on Buddha Maitreya. And then after those 3 years he didn't have any signs really of having gotten to meet Maitreya, which he really, really wanted. So then he decided to leave retreat. And so he was leaving retreat and the first thing he encountered was an old man. And this man was rubbing an iron rod with silk, a piece of silk. And he was trying to make a needle out of this iron rod. And so Sangha saw this and really just realized, wow, what patience, this is extraordinary, the patience this man has to do this. I can continue my retreat. So then he decided to go back into retreat. He went into retreat for 3 more years. And again, he had some dreams of Maitreya, but he was really longing to meet Maitreya, and he didn't. And so he left again after, so now that's 6 years. And he was leaving, and this time he was looking and he saw a pool of water and rocks, and he saw like where this one drops of water were falling on a rock and created a hole, just slowly, drop by drop, this hole had been created in a rock, and he realized, oh wow, so much time, but like look what can be done after with just diligence. And so, okay, I'm going to go back into retreat. So he went back into retreat again for 3 more years. Still during this time he continued to have more dreams and positive signs of Maitreya, but then still Maitreya didn't appear to him, or at least he didn't get to ask the questions that he wanted to ask Maitreya. So he left again, and this time he saw something else. He saw this rock that had become shiny from a bird, like a guess like rubbing its wings up against this rock, and again like thinking how much time that must take for a bird's wings to create a shiny rock. He thought, wow, you know, I could take some more time and keep trying. So he went back in again for 3 more years, and still he didn't meet Maitreya. So this is 12 years of retreat, and you know, then after that he left, and this time he was going down the mountain and he encountered a dog that was severely injured and wounded and had, like, I think just like the bottom half of his body was kind of, his skin had been eaten and he had maggots and fleas on his skin. And so a sangha saw this and felt such compassion for this dog, and said, you know, contemplating the Buddha and how the compassion of the Buddha, he decided, you know, I'm going to try to act similarly and help this dog. And so he realized he couldn't use his hands because he'd injured the fleas or the maggots, and so he used his tongue. And he went down, you know, and started to approach the dog to lick the maggots off the dog's skin, and immediately his tongue kept hitting the ground. So he wasn't actually getting the dog, and when he looked up, he saw Buddha Maitreya. So, you know, illustrating that after so much time, you know, he did get to see him, and Maitreya said, the only reason I've been with you all this time, and the only reason you're only seeing me now is because due to the power of your compassion for this dog. So illustrating that point of just how powerful compassion is, and then at the very end, Rinpoche's conclude the chapter about how really essential compassion is, that without it our practice is rotten.
So the first main topic point takes place on page 41, first paragraph, and page 43 in the last paragraph. It says, pure compassion has the power to remove all karmic obscurations and obstacles to enlightenment. As inner wisdom is uncovered, your understanding of relative and absolute truth increases as you progress towards enlightenment. The Buddha said many times that compassion is the most powerful tool for removing ignorance and increasing wisdom. Guru Padmasambhava taught that without compassion, dharma practice will not bear fruit, and in fact, without compassion, your practice will become rotten. So my question was just, what makes compassion so special? Why compassion?
You know, I heard a story this weekend. Actually, the woman was telling me this story. She had lost her daughter in a car accident about 12 years ago. And right after that, she couldn't do Christmas. Couldn't do Christmas at all, particularly for anyone who's lost a child. Holidays become a very hard time because they have a lot of memories. So she didn't bring out the tree at all, couldn't do any of the different things. They actually just went to Bermuda. That was it, get as far away as they could. And over the years, she just couldn't really bring herself around to do it. It was too painful, too many memories. And she has 2 other daughters who are now in their teens, I think. And this year, her husband had decided to get this really big Christmas tree. Like, I guess for him, he'd finally come around. He said, you know, it's time. He got a 12-foot Christmas tree, you know, filled the living room. And her daughters were having this wonderful time, you know, finding Christmas ornaments, putting them up on the tree, dancing around the garlands, dressing up the tree. And at one point, they had realized that, you know, they didn't have enough ornaments to fill up the tree. And they said, you know, Mom, we don't have enough ornaments. She said, actually, we do. They're up in the attic. They're the ornaments we had from when your sister was still alive. You go up and get them. And so the thing that made the story so interesting was the fact that she was saying afterwards, she's like, she could not bring herself to do that on her own. She couldn't revisit that pain for her own benefit. But when she saw her daughters having such a wonderful time, that was that thing that moved her. It's like, okay, it's okay to go back there. I can have patience with that. I can be there with that pain. I can go back through that for other people. It reminded me a lot of the story. Actually, it was funny. I didn't even realize the 12 years part lined up too, because it was, you know, it'd been 12 years since she had had a Christmas. But it's, you know, that willingness to revisit things, or, you know, to go through things for other people. you know, that's what compassion can do. Really move you beyond yourself.
Mm.
It's just a story that reminded me of this chapter.
Yeah. And it seems like compassion is too, it's that aspect, like earlier we were talking about loving kindness, and all this is relating back to bodhicitta, of course, both the absolute bodhicitta and then our inspiration and our kind of vision, and just how compassion is kind of based on loving kindness, but the way compassion is actually, maybe when we begin to actualize, to actually make an outward, we have that love, and we have not only a love but a desire to help, and a desire to comfort beings and to, you know, uplift their minds and hearts. Like it's kind of, in a way, maybe it's related to that actualizing power too, as far as bodhicitta. And it, of course, is based on thinking of others, and I mean, I think that's definitely related to that too.
You know, a big thing that, or something that struck me very strongly that I heard from His Holiness Dalai Lama before, is he said if we really take, or he was saying, genuine compassion is when not only we have a natural sympathy for other beings suffering, but we actually take responsibility to help end that suffering, to do what we really can that's available to us, to take responsibility to actually remove that suffering. And it's really the emphasis point that struck me was it really strongly, it's not just a wish. There is this aspiring bodhicitta, for sure, but then it really, we have to actually engage it. We have to, in a sense, make ourselves vulnerable, and to go into an unfamiliar thing, and to really put ourselves at risk, in a way. Like just like in this story with the dog, and just this overwhelming concern for this dog, and like Asanga is probably going to get sick, and is going to get mauled by this dog, when he goes down to try to save the maggots. But it's the responsibility. It's not just a feel good, I'm with you, but I'm not really going to do much to actually help you. Kind of a sympathy.
You can see there too, like the way that relates back to like even like the 6 paramitas, which I know part of the concepts and things. But the way the 6 paramitas are like that, as far as actualizing that intention and thinking of others. In the way if you think, also Asanga was also, he wasn't just thinking about the dog, he was thinking about like the maggots that were in the dog, and I mean of course, but just so there's like all of that generosity, there's that mindfulness, and trying to what's the most appropriate way to fix this situation, like really keeping like a wider vision of everything involved in it. And again, obviously he had all the patience to just get him to that point, but then also even with that, even being willing to deal with, cutting his flesh and taking the maggots out with his tongue. All these things, they're just ways to relating back, but just the way the 6 paramitas really are that part of the way of engaging and really developing our bodhicitta.
Like I was like about along the same lines of everything that people have said, like why is compassion important? Like, well, if we look at the 4 immeasurables, all beings have happiness and the cause of happiness. That's the love component. May they be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So I think one of the central points here is everyone is kind of suffering, like we're in the difficult circumstances. Like, and from the practical perspective, if everyone has been our mothers or our fathers or our dear friend and benefited us countless times, forever, that's what the teachings say. And the only thing they want is happiness and to not have suffering. But yet they continuously, by they I mean we, continuously engage in all these activities that are actually the causes of suffering. So it's like everyone keeps doing things that just brings more suffering, but yet everyone wants to be happy, and it's just such a, it's like, in a certain sense, it's just such a poignant circumstance to see that, like, and that's, again, I keep quoting this, the words of my perfect teacher, Khenpo Rinpoches. He wrote a commentary on it, and he said, what is the cause of happiness? It's the belief that in karma, so, you know, that's the vehicle of gods and humans, which means you do virtuous things, and therefore you attain higher rebirths. That's basically the pratimoksha. I mean, that's the gods and humans. The second one is the wish, the determination to attain liberation. That's more like the pratimoksha, the shravapayana, where you're like, I really want to be free from samsara for myself. And then the final one is, it's bodhicitta. It's like, may everyone have this. May everyone, you know, enjoy be free from the causes of suffering. But, I don't know, it just seems like, along these lines with the cultivating the paramitas and everything, if your dearest mother and your kindest friend is just like, once you see clearly the situation of like how everyone wants to be happy, but yet how everyone is just constantly doing things that like is the cause of unhappiness, and just not just now, but like long into the future, then I mean compassion is like, that's not just a negative aspect. I'm not, you could emphasize it and it could be really, you know, upsetting, but in a certain sense, it is upsetting when you realize that it's just like, you know, well, everyone wants to be free from suffering, but it's never going to happen. And like Drakpa said, like those four things, like, will you take it upon yourself? You know, like, wouldn't it be great if they were free from suffering? You know, like, may they be free from suffering. That's the second aspiration. I will be the one to do that. I will be the one to lead them. That's the third aspiration. And the fourth one is praying to the three jewels and saying, please, you know, like, help me, help all these beings, like, be free from suffering. But anyway, I know it's a little long-winded, but it's just, it's kind of a little overview. But like Maitreya, I mean, this one last point is like, how good of a motivation is that? That's the best motivation you could possibly have, to free all beings from suffering. And Maitreya walks by, there's other versions of the story too, and he sees people doing something totally useless, like spending all their time to make a needle out of metal, or like wiping a boulder so the sun can come in the house. That's another version of the story. And Asanga is like, if they spend all this time to do something so useless as just to make a needle, and they're willing to do that for years and years and years, well, look, what is my goal? Is to totally bring all beings to complete enlightenment, so they'll never have experienced suffering again. That's that. Then it's like, okay, they'll be willing to do that, then I should be willing to spend a couple more years in retreat. You know? So, anyway, sorry for the long-windedness.
Well, I was wondering what practices like Asanga did. He didn't have Vajrayana, right? He was before Vajrayana.
I thought I saw in here, at least in the chapter, it talked about he had received empowerment and teachings on Maitreya before he went in, and so he had, his 3-year retreat was supposed to be, or all of his, 4 of his 3-year retreats were on Maitreya.
So he probably had like a mantra and did a visualization.
I don't know the specific.
But I was thinking the interesting thing, and we already kind of touched on it, is that there's that aspect of course he was in retreat and doing, I don't know what practices he was actually doing besides that they were related to Maitreya. But still he was in retreat, and then this moment of compassion that purified him was when he was, of course he was a practitioner, but he was out of his retreat. He was like in the world, interacting directly within his experience with this other actual being, like right before him on all levels, you know. And so the way that, of course based on his practice, he had this pure like love and compassion that he just naturally, you know, did the best thing. And you know, and he thought about it obviously too, because he went to town and he bought the knife and he came back. But like, you know, maybe there's that aspect too, where it's like really actualized, where, you know, not just, I mean, I don't know the degree of his realization before, but just that, the power of actually engaging with the world with compassion, just that's such a powerful thing too. And I mean, it was then, that's the moment, I mean, it could have been any time, but that really brought out his compassion, was actually seeing these beings, especially the dog who was suffering. And then, and it's just a point as far as that, as far as there's that action, the thing that really purified was this pure moment of compassion that was, tangible, sort of, in a sense. It wasn't just thinking about, again, I don't know what he was practicing in the cave, but maybe, we have that opportunity. Of course, our formal practice helps us really kind of touch home and touch, really touch with the freshness and our intention and expand our experience and deepen our meditation, so that then as we, move into the world and have our day-to-day life and experiences and interactions, we're deepening our practice then too, based on that kind of nurturing. But maybe a lot of that time is also kind of actually actualizing, bringing our practice with everything that we're interacting with. This is powerful too, especially with compassion. In these circumstances, maybe we have less control of what's going on, We have a container with our formal practice, which is really good to have, and good to have that support. But then also, again, there's this aspect when we move out into the world, there isn't quite as much control over what we're going to encounter, or, when we're interacting with other people and beings. There's we're kind of more taking things as they come, and actualizing our practice that way. And it's just...
It benefits the other way as well, because
Yeah.
particularly when you see a lot of suffering out there, and you kind of come to this place where, I guess, from person to person it's different, but when you've tried so many things, when you've tried to be involved in these things, but you don't have the tools that you gain from meditation, and you see all of these different ways that people have used for years and years and years. We know that war doesn't cause peace. We know that anger doesn't bring out kindness. We see how we've just been trying for countless aeons to all these other methods, and it's well, what's actually going to work? You want kindness, you have to bring that kindness.
Yeah.
Where am I going to find that kindness? It has to come out of the practice. It has to come out of that mindfulness, and a lot of that really it brings that fuel, because you see that how much pain is out there, and it's this isn't just for me. Because if it's just for me, I'm going to go get a massage. That's where my nice day comes from. That's nice. Maybe I'll go make a brownie or something like that. That sounds like a nice way to spend the day. But that brownie doesn't help someone else. Maybe I'll be a little bit nicer after the massage, but that's going to last a day. But what's that lasting thing that actually causes easing of suffering is the fruit of the practice. And so the post meditation becomes that fuel and that strong motivation to go back to the cushion.
Yeah, definitely.
It just makes me think too about how, they'll talk about in the teachings about the importance of both removing suffering and the cause of suffering. So both and what's the cause of suffering? Ultimately ignorance is the most probably fundamental cause. But just thinking about compassion in those terms, this compassionate wish to alleviate suffering, and it seems like I can just say on my own end, when I experience someone else's compassion, it immediately, not only am I maybe relieved of whatever suffering may have been there in that moment, but there's almost just this inspiration that comes from seeing the other person being so compassionate, that I think touches into that cause of suffering too. Just reflecting on the power of compassion, experiencing compassion on one's own side, I think has that two-edged, really kind of both relieving that temporary suffering and kind of at least giving a glimpse into the power of wow, see what it's like to really act for others' benefit. at least starts to steer you there. I mean, it depends on the action, I think, and what's happening,
Right.
but.
The motivation could be so strong, just getting that taste and saying, oh, I can offer this to other people.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be that peace for other people. Or what's the prayer they say, may I be the doctor and the medicine. That motivation really just, it kindles, it sparks.
I was wondering about the meditation. You can be kind of bringing up compassion, but then I find that sometimes it just becomes a little bit of lost thought. Like you're maybe being very compassionate, but it kind of stops being a meditation and more starts being just thought after thought again. So what is the practice of keeping in a meditation on compassion as opposed to just thinking all these compassionate thoughts kind of and tumbling away?
Just personally, I'm thinking about all the Nunye, practices. One of the, some of the both the visualizations I can think of are that active attitude of giving, either nourishing or, in one of the cases, really being that light and really just beaming out. So when you're, I think particularly in that case, and a lot of the meditations we do, having that focus on the mandala, focusing on your visualization itself and maintaining that. And of course, like you said, sometimes your mind's going to go, ooh, burger, so that kind of some sidetrack thing. But, it comes, if you keep bringing it back, you see it and you just bring it back,
So you're saying that you attach the compassion to the visualization?
But it's not like you have to attach it. That attitude of, you see the suffering, and you know what the suffering does, and so that natural compassion arises. You can't just tack on compassion to something. It comes out of, when you see the suffering. I mean, one of the things about being in samsara is there's no end to the things we can view to give rise to compassion. You can see every different type of neuroses. You can see so much pain, and at all of these places you can see people who look alone, who seem distraught. All of these things, if you allow yourself to see beyond yourself, they can all give rise to compassion. So you don't have to create it. You can just easily just look, and compassion will spring. It sparks.
And so here, in terms of a technical answer, that if you look at the three frames, or the three noble ones, for every practice to be a complete practice, there's a good beginning, good middle, and good end. So the good or noble beginning is always establishing the motivation, which is refuge and bodhicitta. So that's really connecting to that genuine love and compassion in ourselves, and also seeing these objects of refuge. Buddhas and bodhisattvas that have totally fulfilled their own bodhicitta wish and have become Buddhas. So that's first, establishing the motivation. And then second, it's actually the main practice. What is it that we're actually continuing in the practice? And that's always twofold. So there's, in terms of talking more Sutra Mahayana, there's a shamatha, or a concentration, something we're holding in mind during a practice. And then there's the vipassana, or the insight side, and that's actually how flexible our awareness is when we're holding that object. So in a way, in Vajrayana level, that's called a creation stage and completion stage. So in terms of meditation, and not just getting distracted in a tumbling sequence of thoughts or something, or just compassion feels so good, there's actually a way applying that in the practice. And so that's the main noble one, the noble middle, and that's always has some object that we're concentrating on, so a concentration aspect, and then also staying in touch with our awareness, or the more open emptiness aspect of our awareness when we do that. And then the third noble one is always in reaffirming that motivation we started with. So the noble conclusion is making dedication prayers and aspiration prayers. So it's a seamless way of bodhicitta kind of being in its more relative and absolute aspects, and as a full package. But the great master Longchenpa, and of course Khenpo Rinpoche and Khenpo Rinpoche have always teach in that context of the three noble ones. And if we keep it in that context, then it really does answer a lot of those questions about things kind of being murky.
Yeah. There's another way too that he's talked specifically of compassion, of like, says visualize your mother, like what he said, Patra Rinpoche and Atisha said visualize your mother. And Jigme Lingpa said visualize an animal at the verge of being slaughtered, or a sentient being, right, in a really difficult situation. And then bring up the fact that they've been so kind to you in the past. You know, so vividly see them in front of you, and then bring up all that kindness that they've done to you in the past. And then think, oh, they've been so kind to me. My mother did everything for me, or your father, or your friend. And then think, oh, I should repay that. Like, I want to repay that. Because they're suffering, you know, they're on the verge of slaughter, or they're in this difficult circumstances. Trouble now, trouble in the bardo, trouble in the next life, because of all the unvirtuous actions. So this is so terrible, like, and then you do that really vividly, and you have that wish really vividly, and you bring up all those different types of suffering, and then he says, you know, really cultivate the wish that you yourself will personally take responsibility to bring them out of suffering. And then apply that, not just to your mother, but to your brothers, your sisters, your friends, everyone in the whole infinite vastness of space, all sentient beings. You just extend more and more, and then when you get tired, you just rest in compassion. Like that vipassana aspect, you just let go. And you always recognize, like Drapa was saying too, that they're not a for real solid sentient being, you know. They say subject, object, action. The three aspects are all empty. You are empty, you're dreamlike, they're dreamlike, and the compassion itself is dreamlike. So anyway, that's one specific compassion technique.
And there's this like the three aspects of compassion too, which is maybe it's what you just went through. But that object word, the compassion for sentient beings, is one. And then there's thinking about the on all phenomena.
Yeah.
Is that
that takes sentient beings as a focus.
Right, and then all phenomena, and how all phenomena is impermanent, and there's nothing substantially existing. And then the third aspect is that kind of no focus, or like just the completely, it's maybe more like creation, or completion in a way. It's non-conceptual compassion. That's just, maybe if anyone has a more clear way of pointing them out.
Yeah, this is one is like the suffering. So someone's suffering, they're sick. Two is the second can also be said the cause of their suffering, like Amanda was saying. Looking what the cause of why they're suffering is and having compassion at that level. And then third is that natural, unconditioned capacity for compassion we have without, when we're not restricting our mind in a tighter way, or just the natural compassion that arises without limitation. All-pervasive compassion or something.
What was the middle one?
Compassion for the cause. Or Lai was saying the compassion for phenomena. So I think these are three different, they're like two systems looking at compassion.
Or compassion that takes the dharma as a focus. That's what it's sometimes translated as. Looking at the cause of suffering, and the dharma here can mean the dharma or phenomena or reality or whatever.
It's kind of amazing too. You know, we definitely can start with the seeing those very concrete things and gross things, and then the more you experience that compassion, the more fine-tuned your perception can be, and exactly that progression is. You see the gross suffering, when it comes to its full fruition, then you see what's causing it, and then you realize that your compassion doesn't have to be sparked by something, but it's continually within awareness. It's really quite beautiful, very profound.
There's no corner in samsara that's happy. There just the three types of suffering: the suffering of suffering, suffering of change, and all-pervasive suffering. The very nature of everything coming together is it's constantly uncertain. It always is going to break. Like literally, there's nothing we ever do in the samsaric framework that's happy. It's always plagued with instability. And like really, I think if we get sensitive to that, then the compassion starts really coming strong. And that's really too when more this, also like sinking into this emptiness or more flexible, open aspects of compassion is important too. Because we can't just be overly sensitive and really we'll kind of drown in the sensitivity to the amazing suffering that's always happening. But I think really this is, I mean, two things I thought in this story is that if we look at a sangha, like he was this, I mean, one of the things I think that this chapter highlights is, what didn't a sangha do right? For 12 years, what was missing, you know? Because he was this great scholar at Nalanda. He did retreat for 12 years, serious isolated retreat, had gotten the empowerments, had gotten the instructions, like everything had lined up, but so what was missing? And it's really this view, or that motivation, in terms of Vajrayana context, like you said, worldly aspiration, so-called Hinayana aspiration, just my own freedom from suffering, or suffering, freedom of all beings from their suffering, the Mahayana aspiration. It just comes down to a view. We can do so much work, put in so much time, and that view is really critical. Yeah. Both the philosophical way we orient and the heartfelt way that we really feel and activate ourselves in that. Because 12 years, and then, obviously he's purifying and accumulating merit, but it really comes down to the view in the end. And so it says how we start. We really should look at how we start. And the same part, the second thing that was really strong, is this is a teaching we hear every time. It's such a fundamental, basic, essential, can't do anything without this teaching in Buddhism topic. And like, it's the basics that make the practice what the practice is. We can have all these other things, and without the core, you know, it really doesn't work. Like, it really can go really wrong. Or it can just not really, you know, the result is we fizzle out, you know, and we blame the dharma, we blame all these things, you know, without that basic core, you know.
That's the great secret of the dharma, of the Mahayana. The secret the Rinpoche say at the beginning, every time. Cultivate compassion. Everyone's like, oh, I want the secret teachings. It's just like, here it is. Here's the secret. If you take that to heart, the whole thing will go totally smooth, and that's the secret key that opens everything in the whole dharma. But if you don't, you'll always be on the sidelines.
Also, I just thought I'd mention, we've been talking so much, I didn't give my little cue when we're running close to the end, but now we're really very close to the end. So, in a way, without reading it, we've kind of been touching on this second point here, in the part of how, what really keeps our practice genuine and complete, and not, you know, ensures that our practice isn't just going to kind of be a little rotten. But
in Maitreya, it says Maitreya wasn't being uncompassionate.
Right.
It was really on Asanga's side.
Yeah.
His vision, his view, his motivation was being held in a certain way. And he said, great master. It should be really noted, Asanga is like this pillar of, they say there's two main lineages. Second turning is Nagarjuna, all this emptiness teachings of the Buddha. Third turning on all these Buddha nature teachings is Asanga and Maitreya. It's like such a great enlightened being is what his legacy is. It's like almost unparalleled. The two beautiful streams of Asanga and Nagarjuna together, and this mind-only, Madhyamaka, it all comes together, and that we've been handed by Khenpo Rinpoches, because it's the same lineage that they hold. It's such a great master, almost unrivaled. Asanga is so tremendously wonderful. And it was this compassion that really, in the end. And then he saw purely, it's really the quintessential point of this third turning Buddha nature teachings. What is the nature of everything? It is compassion, and it expresses itself purely balanced ways. And then you see Maitreya, see things how Buddha sees things. It's really, I mean, Sanga's amazing.
it kind of goes to, like, even before every teaching, Rinpoches always bring up, of course, as part of our bodhicitta, is like those two motivations, the way that kind of relates back to, like, that purity motivation of, like, really engaging with the bodhicitta, and then the motivation of, like, the vastness view of the purity of all, of everything, and kind of the way those two work together. And I was thinking another thing that just kind of, I thought of a few times as we were talking, but just again kind of on this, the causes and results, and how Rinpoche say many times in many different contexts, but if we really like and aspire to, like, results, then we have to love and nurture and connect, like, even more to the causes of those results we want. And just the way that all relates back to these basic, like, really essential points that Rinpoches are bringing up.
or how they say, never be tired of the virtuous activities and beneficial activities for others. Only be tired of all the negative things that you've done. Only be tired of those. And then never be tired of continually cultivating that, because, you know, the mind is so vast and it just keeps going and going and going until you attain enlightenment. If you're not enlightened, there's room to grow for compassion-wise, you know. And that's a good point. I mean, just, it's so big, and that's the nature of our minds too. So there's no reason why we can't, you know, expand our view, like we've all been saying.
All the best wishes for a wonderful new year, 2013.
Swasti visayantu, chosum sasum jitu bemaju, yinge sode tuje tujenji, henshin paten shera drupeku, nujo dendro zezam tajin sho. Om Swasti, chirpru nantalum ku jenrezi, duku bajum yabyum dujetu, Vela bazan jacho yangsi gar, tendor bende dondu nuchar sho. Kanfi rawe gowe jinkam su, vedan dewa malu junwe ne. Jenre sewan tensen japso yi, jape gaje balu tenjur ji. Om Swasti, sewan rizin bebe jinlaji, Dugi drube la san norden la, Shedrum gulo sunji bajote, Sanchen natan chole namja sho. By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing, from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara may I free all beings. The precious bodhicitta, and those without it may it be generated, and those who have it may it never diminish, but always continue increasing. Thank you.